Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar, Career Ready, How Employers Are Leveraging HBCUs for Driving Leader Talent. This is part 2 of our webinar series, The Promise of HBCUs. I'm your host, Kathy McDonald, Assistant Director for Network Partnerships with the Florida College Access Network. FCAN would like to thank the Florida Power and Light Company for their generous support of this webinar and the webinar series. Before we get started with today's presentation, a few housekeeping items. First, we welcome your questions. This is all about us learning and growing together, so please submit your questions at any time in the Q&A box. I know many of you are familiar with using chat on Zoom. We're going to use the Q&A box today to answer your questions. So if you can put them in there, that would be great. Second, please share what you're learning on your favorite social media platform. We love to learn what's resonating with you. And finally, this webinar will be recorded. All materials will be available within a week of recording. Now, for those folks who are new to FCAN, a little bit about us. Our mission is to lead the collaborative movement to ensure every Floridian achieves an education beyond high school and a rewarding career. Our vision is to grow a Florida working together where education is the pathway to economic mobility for all. We accomplish our work in 3 primary ways. First is through our local college access networks, which are cross-sector coalitions of leaders that collaborate to remove barriers and provide more support for student success. Second is through our research and data, we publish research and data on evidence-based practices and policy opportunities to strengthen Florida's talent pool. And third is through our statewide initiatives. We lead 4 College Ready Florida initiatives that provide schools and community organizations with free resources to help students to continue their education after high school. Our work is guided by our 7 conditions for success, which you can learn more about on our website. Today's webinar provides a great example of many of these conditions, particularly opportunity for everyone and clear information and guidance. So let's get you participating here. Let me go ahead and open up our first poll. We'd love to know where you're calling in from today, what type of organization, so we know who's in the audience with us today. So if you can take a minute and just let us know who's here. That way we make sure we're sharing our remarks to the right audience. Let's give that a few more seconds for folks to vote. 1 more, 2. Okay, let's go ahead and share out those results. So about 30% are from colleges and universities, welcome, and another 22% is with school districts here, so welcome to you all. And we always love to have our nonprofits, our business and workforce development folks, philanthropy, and government joining us. So welcome everyone, we're glad you're here. Okay, so let me drop down there. Okay, so next up, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome back to part 2 of our series, Whitney Walker, who's Senior Community Relations Specialist with Florida Power and Light Company. Whitney, welcome back.
Thanks, Kathy. I appreciate it. We're glad to be here. And on behalf of NextEra Energy and Florida Power and Light Company, we're just so glad that you've taken the time to be here today to hear more about how employers are aligning with historically Black colleges and universities, also known as HBCUs. And at NextEra Energy and Florida Power and Light Company, we have a corporate culture that is focused on our people, their talent, setting big goals, executing, and continuously improving in everything that we do. And I'm proud to be a part of a team that works hard to deliver America's best energy value and with the communities that we serve to make them better places to live, work, and raise a family. And a big part of that is diversity. We know that to power the next era, we need the next great minds. And as a company that was last year named to Forbes magazine's list of America's top employers for diversity, we highly value that diversity of thought, perspective, abilities, and leadership. Because when we all talent from varied backgrounds come together and are engaged and contributing together, we all benefit. And last year, really in light of all of the continued focus throughout the country on social justice and racial equity, our company established working teams of over 100 employees who developed sustainable strategies, initiatives, and specific actions our company could take to make transformational impact in race equity. And we're being very intentional about supporting the building of a stronger and more united nation by advancing race equity for the Black community. And our focus falls in three main areas. We have programs that make a difference, which I have the privilege of managing, that supports organizations, institutions, and initiatives like Florida College Access Network and HBCUs and others making transformational impact in race equity. We have the hiring, retention, and promotion of Black candidates and employees, including developing talent, entering and working within our company. And then we have supplier diversity and venture investment. All of these efforts have led to new collaborations that are ensuring that we have access to more than 30,000 diverse candidates, mentorship programs to connect our employees to Black youth, an investment of over $26 million in programs that are making a difference in our communities. And we have plans to at least triple our spending with Black-owned businesses and suppliers in 2022, as well as an investment of at least $100 million in venture capital and private equity that advances diversity and inclusion. So we're proud to be here today to hear the thought leadership of our esteemed panel, share knowledge, and hear from you, our audience, because together, with great minds, diverse perspectives, abilities, and solutions, we all have the power to transform our country and our communities for generations to come. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you. Okay, on to poll number 2, getting you all participating here. So we want to get a sense of how are you currently partnering with HBCUs? And this one you can answer as many that apply to you and your organization. So offering internships, partnering in academic courses, recruiting new hires, articulation agreements, providing philanthropic support, or you're currently developing HBCUs, or you don't currently partner with them, but you're interested in learning more. And for those of you who are answering other, we'd love if you'd share in the Q&A what that other might be. So let's give you a minute there. Actually, there was one other one that Whitney just shared that we didn't have in our list, which is committing to supporting Black-owned businesses in your procurement, which is another great example of partnerships. Okay, let's give that 3 more seconds. Okay, so great to see a variety here. Lots of folks are maybe in the earlier stages developing relationships with HBCUs. And some folks are here to learn more about how to start that. There's some philanthropic support, some articulation agreements, and then obviously recruiting both in new hires and in offering internships. So great, thanks for sharing, folks. Okay, so let's get that out of the way and let's get started here. To talk a little bit about partnering with HBCUs to increase diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in organizations around the state, I just want to start by making the case that increasing DEIB is actually good for business. The World Economic Forum published their latest report back in June of 2020, which is their toolkit for accelerating social progress in the future of work. And they uncovered, quite a few examples of key KPIs that improved for organizations that are leading their geography and industry in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging at their organizations. And this really helps to make the case for why this investment is good for the organization as well. What they found is 25 to 36% of those who were leaders in their industry and their geography outperformed on profitability. They also found that they saw up to 20% higher rates of innovation in the work that they do. With regards to decision-making, up to 30% greater ability to spot and reduce business risks. They also saw statistically significant causal relationships with engagement and retention for all employees. So employee engagement, as you know, is a key driver of retention, but they were actually able to demonstrate that link. And then finally, they found that expanding hiring to include more diverse talent provides new avenues to staff hard to fill roles. So lots of great fodder there to help companies make the investment. Now, many businesses who are just getting started building more inclusive workplaces often wonder where to start. And it reminded me of what the Federal Department of Labor says in encouraging federal contractors to utilize HBCUs in their recruiting strategies. And what they said is recruit where diversity thrives. So with that, I am thrilled to welcome on our webinar this afternoon Walter P. Cooper Sr., who's Director of Career Education and Leadership Development Center at Tuskegee University. Walter, welcome. And can you start by telling us a little bit more about your role at Tuskegee and how you go about building career readiness in your students?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kathy, for having me and the University, Tuskegee University, on this webinar. We are excited to be able to share some of the exciting new initiatives that we have created here at Tuskegee University. My name again is Walter Cooper Sr. I am currently the director of the Career Education Leadership Development Center. And because of the pandemic, we have found that there is a wonderful chance, a wonderful opportunity in which we have in front of us to relaunch and reimagine how we actually collaborate and work with our industry influencers and companies in order to help our talented students get opportunities along their career pathway. One thing that we're doing here at Tuskegee, and we found through research, is that a lot of students are graduating with the technical skills in order to be successful, but are oftentimes lacking some of those soft skills, those employability essential skills necessary to make that transition. What we're doing is purposely engaging our incoming freshmen and providing in our new student orientation opportunities for them to be made aware and learn more about these employability essential skills. We're also working and partnering with industry influencers and a lot of our corporate partners to provide us with some of the essential skills that they deem necessary for a successful, I want to say, experiential learning experiences, internships, co-ops, and ultimately successful characteristics of students that transition into industry full-time. We look at this recruitment process as something that is year-round. Recruitment is not just working with our institution during our career fairs, but we want you to be able to immerse yourself into the culture here at Tuskegee University and really take part in helping develop our students and preparing them for workforce readiness. So here at Tuskegee, we are excited to share some additional ideas and ultimately work with existing corporate partners and creating new relationships with new industries, because I was surprised to see we have 6% of our students come from the Florida area. And I was like, wow, that's a significant number of a population of our students. So we work with Florida companies and look to continue to build relationships with additional Florida companies to better prepare our students for that workforce transformation. So I'm excited to be a part of this panel, and I'm certainly honored to be with such esteemed panelists.
Thanks so much, Walter. great introduction to Tuskegee. And now we get to look at the other side of the recruitment equation. Next up, I am thrilled to welcome Diana Nguyen, who's the HR College Recruiting and Placement Specialist at NextEra Energy. Diana, can you share a little bit more about your role and how HBCUs are part of the trusted colleges you partner with to find diverse talent?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us here today, Kathy. It's a pleasure. So my name is Diana Nguyen, and I've been with NextEra Energy, Florida Power and Light for the last 4 years, working at a college recruiting capacity, recruiting our interns as well as any of our entry-level candidates into the company. We have partnerships with HBCUs, national universities, local Florida universities, and more specifically, when we do target HBCUs, we've targeted around 6 to 8 in the past, and then have recently increased that number to around 10 HBCUs. Partnerships can go anywhere from, attending their career fairs, attending any of their events, to partnering with their student organizations on campus, to reaching out to our former interns to see exactly what they're involved in on campus, and attending any of their extracurricular meetings or doing resume reviews, to interview preparations on campus. Making sure that the students are prepared prior to career fair or prior to interviewing with other companies, and giving any advice that we can to all of the students in order for them to be successful throughout the course of the years, and we're getting ready to go into a full-time opportunity. Here, it is our responsibility to help train and help prepare all of our students that are coming in. And even if they're not coming in straight to NextEra Energy, we like to give our time out and making sure that we're giving the best advice that we can for career readiness. So happy to be here today. Kathy, thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, Diana. And rounding out our panel, I'm thrilled to welcome on our webinar this afternoon, Stephen Ball, who's Senior Vice President, External Engagement at Wells Fargo. We want to look at this from all angles. And so, Stephen, as you know, I set us up with making the case that diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is good for business. As you know, having diverse voices at the table in a culture of belonging inspires innovation that leads to good business results. So can you share a little bit about your role and how companies can think about partnering with HBCUs beyond just the HR department?
Thank you so much, Kathy, and thank you to the FCAN and to NextEra for including us today. I'm excited to be a part of this, and I'm excited that I sit in northern New Jersey, and I think the Floridians on the call have kind of shared some of their weather for us today, which is nice because it's unseasonably warm up here. So much appreciated for that. Kathy, as you mentioned, so I lead the external engagement strategy development for the Wells Fargo Diverse Segments Representation and Inclusion Division. That's a division within the company that touches all pieces of what we do. So whether you're in consumer banking, whether you're in legal, whether you're in technology, whether you're in commercial banking, the strategy that we develop for our external engagement will ideally touch each part of the company. And a big part of what I've looked at is stitching together across enterprise strategy for HBCU engagement. And one of the things that I've arrived at as a conclusion in doing that is that I really think, for the sake of both Wells Fargo and other companies, making HBCU engagement a sustainable long-term endeavor, it's really incumbent on us to look beyond just philanthropy and HR as areas for engagement. Now, it doesn't mean that those aren't important areas. Obviously, they're critically important. As one example, today at Wells Fargo, we just announced $1 million for our HBCU completion, college completion scholarship in partnership with the Thurgood Marshall Foundation. And that money will help college years at HBCUs meet the financial needs to complete their final year of undergrad. But I think a big part of this, where there's an immense opportunity, is looking beyond that. So looking at things like our thought leadership and our subject matter expertise. how can we collaborate with HBCUs to benefit them and their administrations and students, as well as benefit our own companies and align the work that we do with the tremendous wealth of knowledge that comes from HBCUs and their communities. So as we go forward, I'm really eager to look at different ways that we can partner, again, not just for the philanthropy and the HR, but also for the business. And we're exploring that in some really interesting ways right now, such as influencing some of the curriculum development. As Walter said, I think it's critical for employers to be partners in shaping the curriculum that's ultimately needed to help students succeed once they enter the workforce. So things like that, things like partnering with HBCUs and minority depository institutions as well, when you look at access to capital for critical infrastructure projects and other investments that schools want to make in their communities. These are things where companies like Wells Fargo and others have tremendous opportunities to stand up and make a difference. And so I'm excited as we look ahead to really focus on that business alignment to build a sustainable engagement for the future.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can have more of a conversation now. So great introduction and really helping us look at this from all sides of the puzzle. So let's get started with panel questions. How are employers becoming more intentional about building inclusive cultures through diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? And how do HBCUs fit into those strategies? And I'd love to start with our FPL folks. So Whitney and Diana, do you want to share a little bit of your thoughts on that front?
Sure. Whitney, do you want me to go first?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll go first. All right. So I would say about a year ago, we weren't having discussions like this and having panels like this like we are now. And our company is now, more aware of everything that's going on. And like Whitney said earlier, we formed the racial equity teams that we have, and we're seeing similar things at other companies as well. So we've created different diversity pillars, and in our environmental, social, and governance report for this year, 2021, we've actually included that racial piece in there. And then on a front, we also have our employee resource groups. So we have, I believe, 14 employee resource groups now at the company to help with DE&I. Yesterday we celebrated Diwali. Today we're doing a veterans event. So definitely doing a lot of things throughout the organization through our employee resource groups. And then on a front of how HBCUs fit into that category, we've been partnering with a lot of different HBCUs and coming up with different ideas on how we can better partner with them. So some of the ideas that we've come up with are, Dean's Day or recruiting, and how can we identify different opportunities to work with our HBCUs and not just attending their career fairs. So those are just some of the smaller things that we started off with, and we're continuing the conversation, opening it up to different business units at the company and different HBCUs, and seeing what ideas we can all have to come together and try to formulate, something that we can all work together to improve our relationships with the HBCUs to help our DE&I.
And Diana, just to add on that, part of how we were able to get to Walter to participate in today's conversation, we have an incredibly engaged employee base of HBCU graduates. And what we are learning and what we are seeing is that a lot of these HBCU graduates over-index in their love for their college and their level of engagement at the corporate level. And so as we're thinking about being more intentional about our building of inclusive cultures, we actually were able to find Walter as a result of our employees and their tried and true relationship with Tuskegee. And that's how we navigated our way to having Walter here today. And so, I think that there is a sense of, real coalition building that happens within the organization as a result of using HBCUs as the context. But that level of inclusivity, that level of engagement and volunteering or voluntolding when you're responding to requests like that, when folks have a knowledge base and we have access, and bringing that to the organization because there's a level of trust and there is a level of wanting to see your HBCU win. And so I think that that inclusive culture is naturally and organically developing itself as a result of this intentional focus around race equity and around HBCUs. And the potential of it is just becoming, quite frankly, just more than we ever could have imagined.
Great examples there. And Stephen, anything you want to add in terms of how are employers becoming more intentional about building inclusive cultures, and how do HBCUs fit into those strategies?
Well, I would just really echo what Whitney said around the level of enthusiasm that you see from HBCU grads in particular. I think it's important to acknowledge that these were always great schools, and they have, a century plus of greatness to stand on. One of the, I guess, positive byproducts of the tragic events last year was that there has been this kind of awakening around HBCUs. But I think it's important to acknowledge these were always great. And so the enthusiasm that was always there has gotten more of a spotlight now. And so when you do things like, for example, in our case, we recently sponsored FAMU's homecoming and had a lot of engagement there. We had just tremendous support from employees that were FAMU alums, and they were so eager to be a part of that. And the interesting thing that I noticed, though, was that many of them likely would have gone to the homecoming game regardless, right? Because they're just so connected and inspired there. So there's really a groundswell of enthusiasm to tap into, and I think it's important to listen to that. And one of the things that I've found most valuable in my role is the listening sessions with representatives from different schools, whether folks like Walter and his peers at places like Shaw University, North Carolina Central, and others, understanding the different needs that students are facing and that the challenges that institutions are facing and the opportunities as well. I think taking that approach of listening can really help in fostering a more inclusive and diverse environment within companies.
Yeah, such a great example. And I know, Walter, you're seeing, as you talked a little bit about earlier, how there's really this new opportunity to re-engage with employers and really partners so that it's, as you've said before, it's not a one and done. So can you share a little bit of some examples of how employers are starting to think differently and how they're engaging you as a partner in their efforts to build more inclusive, not only work environments, but again, kind of underpinning building stronger businesses as a result?
Well, to that point, we have been very successful in graduating students that have had the love and the commitment of wanting to give back. And Whitney mentioned that with our Strong Alumni Association and students and our alum wanting to make sure that Mother Tuskegee is constantly in the forefront. But how are companies giving back? I mean, that has been something that through the years have been something that has helped really highlight our student experience here at Tuskegee. I know as the director of the center, we get calls every day wanting to engage with our students, wanting to engage with the institution. To that point, we make sure that everyone understands it's about trying to find the right fit. And at Tuskegee, it's about trying to understand that this is just, as you said earlier, Kathy, it's not a one and done. we look to build relationships, partnerships that will be self-sustaining and fulfilling for our students, so that as they get these, as we prepare them for the opportunities and as they apply and oftentimes receive these experiences, that they can thrive in that environment. So what I have noticed most recently is that we're building capacity that is going to be self-sustaining. So whereas previously individuals, industries want to come just for the career fair, and the recruitment cycle is, maybe in the fall and they announce in the spring, we want to have you immersed on our campus, engaging with our students throughout the school year, so that they can have a better understanding of the culture as it changes in our society now. We want to prepare them for those experiences. So I think our most important thing is really trying to create more intimate experiences for our corporate partners to come engage with our students here on campus to try to provide more meaningful experiences.
Yeah, great example. And I know, Stephen, you had talked about how different parts of your organization are thinking about ways to engage, where again, it's not strictly recruiting or strictly philanthropy. Can you give us an example of what that might look like?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, one most recently that we're really excited about is our work in establishing a legal internship for FAMU. We can't release the details of it yet, but the concept has been finalized. And so we're excited to kick that off in 2022 as an inaugural internship program where we'll host a student from FAMU at our one of our Charlotte offices. And that's just one example where that's a different part of the company than folks typically think of in terms of being engaged. And so by that student coming, spending 10 weeks or so within one of our offices, getting exposure to a big bank and all that is entailed there, that can tremendously increase their own personal network and provide a ton of enrichment that'll propel them forward in their career. Another thing that we've also looked at recently is trying to overlay the need for employees in our consumer banking with the tremendous talent that there is in HBCUs. So we've looked at a cohort of schools across North Carolina and South Carolina. At some point, we hope to get to Florida with that as well. But HBCUs where they're students that also have a desire for employment that's different than kind of what you see as traditional student employment, in food services and things like that. So something like that is a really, to Walter's point, intentional investment in those students. And in having the conversations, Walter, with your peers at some of the schools that make up that cohort, one of the things that one of them said was essentially what you said, which is that if employers are approaching us, it can't just be a check the box endeavor. We're looking for people that are meaningfully invested, that really want to have a real long-term relationship that is sustained and where we're talking multiple times, not just one and done, like you said. So Kathy, I hope that answers the question, but we're definitely excited about the number of things that we have underway.
Yeah, and I think what your example and the examples all of you have given is really how to move this from a diversity check the box, kind of thing to really building a work environment that's inclusive and belonging, because, as all of us know, people thrive when they feel valued and they feel like they belong. And when they don't, you're not going to get the best out of them. So you're really trying to move that needle in terms of that. Whitney, I know you've talked before or shared a little bit earlier about how you've developed a program that is really trying to embed the commitment to DEIB throughout your organization. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. As much as this is an external conversation, it's also about shining the spotlight inward as well. It is just as much an internal commitment to HBCUs as it is a statement of our commitment to that HBCU. And so being able to look at the talent pool, look at the strengths, and look at the curriculums that our HBCUs are teaching these students, and be able to take it by business unit or department and say, you know, perhaps we look at adopting this HBCU or a program, or providing advice, consult, curriculum development. It really has to be an internal focus at the department and business unit and enterprise level, as much as it is an action for an HR leader, to make sure that you're being very targeted in your approach and strategic in your approach in engaging these students and recruiting these students. So I always talk about the top-down approach and the ground up. You have to have the groundswell and the leadership happening at the same time. And so when you look at embedding this commitment throughout the organization, I have just really, I think that it is remarkable, the level of response that we have gotten over the last year from our employees. As soon as our working teams were developed and these plans were established, they were ready to go. They wanted to implement, they wanted to volunteer, they wanted to mentor, and we had to get the relationships going before we could have implementations for our employees to act on. They said, no worries, we're going to work with you on our strategy. And we've been aligning really with all of our leaders and all of the employees who sit in these teams to continue to develop strategies. So you can't just have a plan in place and just say, all right, we're just going to stick to the plan. You have to be able to continue the development. And so I think that what we're seeing here is the need to not just make it an external exercise in engaging with HBCUs, but really to embed this process into the fabric of the organization.
Yeah, and so if we stay with that, a question we got from the audience was, how can private philanthropy or philanthropic organizations help advance these efforts, and certainly with HBCUs, and then, you know, in partnership with corporations? Obviously, unrestricted funds are always appreciated. But Whitney, sort of staying with you for a second, on the corporate philanthropy side, you know, again, as you're thinking about embedding it throughout your organization, you know, how is that starting to be reflected in your work?
I think that you are seeing an enormous amount of capacity building and scale. And so as you're creating these philanthropic strategies, because they're not just philanthropic investments, they're strategies, they're relationships, they're cohesive and 360. But I think that what you're starting to see is that, you know, these philanthropic dollars are being added onto in things like employee donations, employee giving. When you see your employees who are willing to not just donate their time, but their treasure as well, you kind of know that the needle is moving along when they're willing to give from their own. I think that you're seeing a level of capacity building in terms of each individual department or business unit wanting to contribute also. And so by establishing the process, getting the relationship going from a philanthropic perspective, you're just growing the foundation for others to get on board and participate in either the giving of treasure or the giving of time. So that would be my answer, is that we're seeing just the capacity of it develop in thinking that this was a momentous opportunity, and actually being able to delegate and to share the responsibilities with others who are more than willing to be participants.
Yeah, great example. And we know from research that we've talked about in a prior webinar, somewhere between 30 and 50% of college students across the board are food and housing insecure. And so, Stephen, how is Wells Fargo starting to think about some of those, you know, even emergency support for students from a philanthropic standpoint?
Yeah, well, certainly through the pandemic and, at the height of the challenges last year in particular, we provided support to students at a variety of campuses who were experiencing those challenges because of COVID and all the disruption that it created. I think another important thing to highlight, Kathy, going back to your question, is really just the breadth of ways that you can make a difference through philanthropy. There are certainly things that on a macro scale, like United Negro College Fund or Thurgood Marshall College Fund, which Wells Fargo has been a major partner with those organizations and impacts nearly the entire HBCU universe. And we're thrilled about those relationships and we look forward to continuing that. But there are also micro level, I would say, opportunities as well. And one thing that I learned, again, in connecting with Walter's peers around the initiative to hire students for consumer banking roles is a number of the Career Center leaders stressed that because of the pandemic, a lot of the students lacked access to a professional wardrobe. And so even if, if we're trying to hire them into roles, they may not have the attire needed to start on day one. And so something like that, whether it's partnering with other local organizations to provide clothing to the schools. A lot of the schools had campus closets where students could borrow clothing temporarily for interviews or for jobs even. But figuring out ways to support entities like that, I think, can be really impactful. Even if if you're not making a huge donation, if you can just find professional clothing to contribute, it can make a world of difference for students. And I don't mean to steal your thunder, Walter, but I think I recall you mentioning a certain students who were holding themselves back from even doing interviews because they felt like they weren't going to have the right professional appearance. So when you think about something like that, it's just heartbreaking. But the important thing I would say is that there's such tremendous opportunity to make an impact, even without necessarily donating high dollars or giving a ton of.
And I just want to jump in real, Kathy, because thank you, Stephen. I hadn't mentioned that in this call here, but I mean, that's probably one of the toughest conversations in which I had with one of our students in serving in this capacity. And that is to hear that they did not feel confident because in applying for opportunities, because they just didn't have the appropriate attire to, seek that opportunity. And that's something that I definitely have committed myself to moving forward, is to make sure that we eliminate that barrier. So when we work with corporate partners and industry influencers, we want to make sure that, we adequately can not only prepare our students with the employability essential skills for them to be successful, but we also understand there's some other necessities that are required for our students to be able to feel confident to move forward and seek these transformational opportunities. So yeah, that was a tough one for me, I have to admit.
Well, and I think that's a great example of inclusivity and belonging, because that student felt comfortable telling you the truth, rather than just not showing up or getting the opportunity in ghosting or whatever, where they're not there. It turns out it was a financial barrier. They didn't have the clothing to feel confident going into that interview. So I think that's a testament to that student's relationship with you. So related to that, one of the questions we have from the audience is, with the recent refocus on HBCUs and the immeasurable value they offer to the workplace, do you see schools like Tuskegee, Howard, FAMU, and other HBCUs offered equal credibility in recruitment and career opportunities when compared to a Harvard, Dartmouth, Florida State, et cetera, in the future? Diana, how about if we start with you, since you're on the recruitment side?
Yeah, I think, you know, it doesn't just start from the school, but also educating the people who are hiring as well, and making them understand, you know, we are hiring from a fair environment and everything like that. But, you know, we make sure when we are speaking to our hiring managers and when we are partnering with different universities, to make sure that they know exactly what our hiring managers are looking for. And when we're out there and we're doing the recruiting piece, and you know, we're looking for qualified candidates, that we are presenting a diverse slate of candidates over, whether that be from Harvard or North Carolina A&T, or you know, FAMU, or you know, University of Florida. We believe in giving every student a chance, you know, and a lot of times, yes, they may not look the best on the resume, but once you talk to the student and, you know, just giving them a shot, or we do a lot of like virtual or video interviews prior to sending them to the hiring manager, where they're able to discuss their qualifications and everything like that over, you know, a resume, or someone who was, you know, fortunate enough to take a resume course, or, you know, having a parent pay for a resume coach or an interview coach. We try our best on our end to, you know, be there for them, or to do that for all of our students that come in and may not have the best resume, or may not have the best conversations, or are able to interview as well. So we try on our end before, you know, preparing them to go over to the hiring manager, to make sure that there is equality across the board when we are presenting candidates.
And I know you've talked before that one of the elements of technical assistance that you offer is, you know, resume reviews and helping them understand what an employer looks for in a resume, or how to translate those skills they're learning on campus into ones that employers value. Yeah.
Right. Yes. So, you know, I was just in a NSBE conference session over the weekend. So the National Society of Black Engineers, and someone was giving a presentation on resumes, and she said, you know, you put that you have communication and organization down on your resume, but if it doesn't show through, you know, on your bullet points, or if your resume is very unorganized and things are all over the place, you know, what we see on there is not really organization or communication. So we do a lot of resume preps, and we do a lot of, you know, elevator speech preps or interview preps in order to have our candidates prepared. Or if we see someone applying, you know, and they have some of the skills that we're looking for, and it doesn't really show through on the resume, but we've already talked to them at a career fair, we, you know, they reached out to us on LinkedIn, we'll reach out individually and just, you know, coach them on how to make it more presentable in order for them to apply.
Great. All right, I'm going to shift gears here a little bit, because I know we have quite a few state colleges and technical colleges listening in today. So Walter, I'm going to shift to you. So one of the ethos, or one of our 7 conditions for success with FCAN, is multiple pathways to success, and that can include stackable credentials. So how can technical colleges and our state colleges prepare students to transition to a school like yours? You know, obviously articulation agreements are sort of the formal process, but can you talk a little bit about that idea of stackable credentials and how students can transition into your institution?
Absolutely. I think one of the critical pieces in establishing that collaboration or partnership is really communicating. Students now have access to reach out and communicate not only with faculty and staff, but with other students to help find the right fit for them. As an administrator, you know, it's also imperative that the communication between the junior college, the 2-year college or institution, and the 4-year institution are going, you know, it's a mutual exchange of ensuring that the credits that they're receiving at the junior level, at the 2-year college, is transferable to the institution. So that's where the articulations are very critical, because there's nothing worse than a student, you know, trying to transfer into a 4-year institution and not being able to have those credits that they so rightfully earned, not fully accredited once they move on to that next institution. So both institutions must work to eliminate that barrier of causing more distress onto students. We want students to thrive, be it at the 2-year institution, and if they want to transition to a 4-year institution, that should be a seamless transition, especially when we're talking about the various disciplines in which they may be looking to pursue. So I think that's a conversation that is, certainly ongoing, but certainly one that needs to continue to happen in order for us to eliminate that barrier for our students and help them be successful.
Well, and I think it speaks to what you were saying earlier about deepening partnerships with some of your not only your employers, but your like institutions, so that there is that more seamless pathway. Whitney, I
Hey,
know
Kathy,
Oh yeah, please.
I'm sorry, before we go on, can I address your previous question?
Please.
I just think it's important. So I am not an HBCU alum. I went to University of Michigan for college and Harvard for law school. But one thing I think it's important to stress, and one unique value proposition that HBCUs provide, is that they really emphasize building leaders. And it's really from I've learned through my journey and getting to know the community better, is that there's really, I think in part because of the smaller size and the faculty to student ratio and just the overall culture, the notion that the Harvards and Michigans and others of the world, yes, you get a good education there. But I think in terms of job readiness and preparation, I would argue that HBCUs are just as strong as anyone, because you do get that individual attention and that individual emphasis on leadership that even some of the schools that I mentioned don't necessarily do, at least in a very personal, individualized fashion. So with all, no diss obviously to my alma maters, but I just would want to clear up this notion that, that the schools that you listed earlier, Kathy, are in any way inferior, because they're not. If anything, they prepare students even better in some respects.
Well, and it makes me think of something that I know Whitney has talked about before, is you've talked about when you've hired some of your interns and some of your employees from HBCUs, the confidence is what you noticed. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. This is part 2 of our HBCU series together. And in part 1, we had one of our summer college interns featured as a panelist. Diana was extremely helpful in helping us recruit a group of interns who were HBCU students, and we filmed them. We wanted to hear about their experience. We wanted to talk about HBCUs. We wanted to get, some live feedback on how their internship was going, and they all blew us away. It was just profound how confident these students were in talking about the work that they did over the summer in an industry or a segment of the business that they had never been exposed to, talking about the mentorship that was offered to them during their internship and the mentorship that happened before they even got there to prepare them for the internship. And the panelist was actually chosen because she blew us away so much during her video interview. And we weren't sure because she was a freshman in college. She was actually graduating going into her sophomore year. And when she spoke on camera, we said, she's the one, So she defied ageism, she defied everything around, the criteria of who you think these students really are. And she talked a lot about that confidence in our last panel, about how her community has seen her transition going from high school to the HBCU, and she's come home now, her first summer at home, and they said, wow, you left a girl and and you came back a woman. And so I think that that's just kind of what you see ingrained in these students. And I myself, I was not an HBCU graduate. I went to Dartmouth. And so, you know, when I think about the recruiting tracks that we were both on and how mine was far more generalized, here's the opportunity, you can, you know, go after it if you want to. And at the HBCUs, there is just a personal touch that is so intrinsic to these institutions to really take these students in a one-on-one capacity and make sure that they are they're supported the entire way through. And we're watching it, we're witnessing it through our students, through our internship program, and the relationships that we're developing in some of these with the organizations that we're doing scholarships with. And so it's remarkable, quite frankly, to see the level of, we'll just call it swagger, that these students have, and professional swagger at that. And so I think it's quite something to behold.
Yeah, great example. And she blew me, I mean, definitely had a mic drop moment. So if you haven't listened to part number 1, I encourage you to go back to listen to that, because Sierra truly was amazing. So kind of staying in that theme, Walter, one of the questions that came in from the audience was, how are HBCUs benefiting from serving as a talent scout for organizations and companies? And I suspect from the way this was worded, there was a sense that maybe this is a one-sided transactional relationship. But as you've talked about earlier, it doesn't sound like that's what you're looking for.
Far from.
Right.
Far from. I mean, when you look at the talent that has come from all HBCUs, I mean, it is remarkable, you know, and I thank Stephen as well as Whitney for acknowledging, and Diane as well, for acknowledging the fact that the talent pool, when you recruit at a HBCU, you're not minimizing anything. If anything, you could be elevating your organization, the trajectory of thought, the innovation, the ability to have multiple perspectives is something that we as a culture need to continue to try to obtain. I mean, here at Tuskegee, we're proud that when we say HBCU, that doesn't mean all Black. You know, we want to, you know, dispel that myth. You know, we pride on having all students from all ethnicity, all religion background. We are a melting pot. And we, coupled with the love that is just enriched the culture of HBCUs. And I can speak for Tuskegee in particular. You know, there's something special. And when you talk about alum that go on and be pioneers in their various endeavors and always wanting to come back and help in uplifting our current students, it's remarkable. You know, so when we are operating in this space and looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion, this is not, you know, opportunity of, you know, just helping out, you know, HBCUs. You're gonna be helping your organization, because the talent that you're gonna get from our institutions, watch out. It's something, it's a testament to the notoriety in which we're seeing now, but this is nothing new.
Yeah, great example. You know, we're wrapping up here, Diana. I'm wondering, you know, in a minute, if you can talk about how you're partnering differently with HBCUs in terms of how you go about recruiting there.
Yeah, so from our standpoint, you know, we partner as much as we can with career services, as well as any professors if need be. And then in turn, we really utilize our former interns or our current interns and, you know, reach out and see if they have any student organizations that they're a part of, or any connections that they can connect us with. And we participate in as much as we can. We believe in high touch points. So keeping in contact with you know, our former interns, we send out, you know, monthly newsletters, just showing what we're doing, spotlighting a few interns, and utilizing them as a resource for us. and just making sure that, they came to work for us. We, loved the work that they did, and we want more students like them. So if they can introduce us to their network of friends, family, other students and colleagues, it really does help us when we are recruiting. So we try to utilize, our students and our interns as much as possible. And then we even go back to our employees once we converted our interns. And, this past weekend, we were at the NSBE conference. They reached out very last minute and asked if we could have anyone support for their NSBE junior, so any of the high schoolers that were interested in STEM careers. So we reached out to all of our HBCU alums, and we had 2 volunteer, and in the end they came back and they said, I love doing this. I love sharing exactly what I do, and in turn, it gives them the opportunity to share what their career path is and how they got there. And students may not know this is what an opportunity looks like, and it really does open a few doors for them.
I love that. Obviously, career services on our campuses, makes so much sense to partner with, but I love actually going to, through the students to their community organizations or the groups that they're partnered with. So with that, I'm going to have to leave it there. It's 2:00. Thank you to Diana, to Stephen, Walter, and Whitney for a wonderful conversation today around how HBCUs are such a great example of inclusivity and belonging, and how that leads to really helping students thrive who can be a great addition to your team. With that, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. If you aren't already a subscriber to the Florida College Access Network's list, I encourage you to do so you stay up to date on upcoming webinars, policy briefs, and all the other great things we have coming out. Have a fabulous day, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.